I was going to take the day off, but a story comes along and you just can't ignore it. I was kind of just surfing YouTube and this hit my algorithm, and I think that it did it on purpose, where it was just like, hey, you need to make content today because this is a story that I think that Piers Morgan was just like, hey, this guy's been making content about me. Let's give him something that's specially curated for him. And I just happen to be wearing this, by the way, so I don't want to bury the lead about what this is about. So without further ado, let's just go for it. Hey.
Well, now a sensational Netflix documentary has cast doubt on Vince McMahon's career and legacy.
He doesn't care. He doesn't care about you. He didn't care about your family.
He put all those females in a situation where they could not say no.
They probably put their own self-respect on the back burner because ultimately that's what you want to hear from the bosses of all bosses.
As soon as I came through the curtain, he was there, and he was there to let me know just how mad he was at me.
Hey, well, look, in classic WWE fashion, it's time to introduce to the uncensored ring a surprise guest.
I called you out 30 years ago.
That's what I'm trying to tell you, is if you looked at it fairly.
This guy's delusional.
That was a good run-in, Piers.
Oh, man, I'm so excited. Wrestling, guys. This is about Vince McMahon. This is not about politics, but it is a Piers Morgan episode. Let's go!
McMahon is the dynastic powerhouse behind the biggest sports and entertainment franchise in history. World Wrestling Entertainment, WWE, once a regional patchwork of modest family entertainment, is now a global juggernaut worth $6.8 billion. It merged with Dana White's UFC a year ago. Some even credit Vince McMahon and WWE with teaching a certain political heavyweight about bombastic timing and how to work a baying crowd. Well, now a sensational Netflix documentary has cast doubt on Vince.
Just a quick little history lesson. He did not actually wrestle. He had a surrogate, and Vince McMahon surprisingly did too. Although the story goes that he was convinced that he was going to wrestle Trump.
McMahon's career and legacy, airing claims about ruthless practices and steroid culture, and according to one recent lawsuit, depraved and humiliating acts. Many say he couldn't decipher himself from his pontifical on-screen personality. The question in all this, though, is a bit like the wrestling itself. Where is fact and where is fiction? A question that McMahon himself struggles to answer.
Well, why do I get this feeling that Piers Morgan's going to be very, very kid's gloves with Vince McMahon in this?
The lines of reality are very blurred in our business. The individual loses all sense of who they really are.
My name is not Vince. My name is Mr. McMahon.
Vincent Kennedy McMahon. You're fired.
Well, to debate the Ultimate Showman's
That's where Trump got it, by the way.
ultimate legacy, we've invited some of McMahon's biggest supporters and biggest critics into the uncensored arena. Marvin Hoffman is a former WWE star and now YouTuber. Jonathan Coachman was a WWE announcer and is now an elite
The first guy's Maven.
sports analyst and host of Behind the Turnbuckle. Vince Russo
Bro!
was the head writer during the infamous
what's up,
Attitude
bro?
Era of WWE. And Charlie Orlott, an ex-WWE backstage interviewer and now host of Outkick in the Morning on Outkick.com. So welcome to all of you. A very high-powered
She was Charlie Caruso on WWE programming.
panel, but was a very high-powered saga in many ways. Jonathan, you worked very closely with Vince McMahon for a long period of time. How
I think.
accurate is this new series that's come out about
it is.
Well, I think it's fairly accurate, Piers, and thank you very much for having me on the show. It's great to see all the other guys and ladies that I worked with. I think it's accurate, but I think also that when you're talking to people like us who've been inside, I spent a total of 13 years in the WWE, and also my character on camera was Vince's assistant. And I think that, though, the term softball came to mind. I know Vince was very upset that it was a hit piece. I didn't find that at all. I think it was fairly accurate when you talk about the time we spent on the road, the things he made us do. And I think the overriding sentiment, Piers, that came out of that was the fact that none of us, at least not with me, did I ever feel like I could say no. And I only said no one time in my entire 13 years with Vince. And when I look back on it now, that's one of the things I regret the most. But as far as accuracy, I think it was accurate, but I certainly don't think they went
Are
far
you
enough
implicated in some
all
stuff?
the things that he made a lot of us do.
Okay, so what is the real Vince McMahon like? For those who don't know him, in the documentary, you can see a hardworking, very committed, passionate, very successful business brain at work. You can also see a ruthless, egotistical, depraved monster who'll pretty much screw anyone, including his own family, to get what he wants. So from your perspective, Jonathan, where's the truth?
I hate to say this, Vince Russo's probably the one that can answer the most on this one.
I think there's a little bit of both.
Charlie
I
might
saw
have
Vince
some.
McMahon that I would deal with him when we're shooting skits, when we're shooting a lot of things, and he was a very nice man, and he would do things very quietly to take care of a lot of guys that were getting older that couldn't make a living on their own, and you can't walk into a bank after you've been a WWE superstar and ask for a job. The other part of Vince, though, is he doesn't care. He doesn't care about you. He didn't care about your family. He didn't care about. There was one time, Piers, that I was home on Christmas Eve, and I got a call to fly back to Connecticut from Kansas because Vince wanted to shoot a skit to be in the show on Monday so then he could spend time with his family. And though you talk about the regrets, that's the Vince that I think I remember the most, is as long as it was good for him and good for the company, he didn't care about the fact that if we were with our parents or with our kids or with our families. And I think you'll get.
Well, okay. Dude, like any media job is going to call for that. Like when I did broadcasting school, that was something that they just said. It's like, are you prepared to be on call during Christmas? Are you prepared to work, the long weekends and hours? Like they kind of tried to train us for this kind of thing. And they said that this is how it is in pretty much any media atmosphere. If you want to succeed, you have to be able to make those sacrifices. So
get that sentiment across the board. So I think it's somewhere in the middle. But certainly, as I look back, a guy that I used to respect and was incredibly loyal for, I would never be that guy today for him. No chance.
Interesting. Vince, I mean, you were one of the writers, obviously.
If he wanted to actually like try and get this on camera, like
help blur that line between
straight to the pay, whatever thing is, yeah, he should have definitely framed his camera a little bit better.
Fact and fiction. My sons were very into WWE for a few years, and I took them to a few of the events, and it was incredible entertainment. But I did have to explain to them that, you realise this is not real. But then to a degree it was real. And the people were being thrown around. They were entertaining.
So you're a dick.
It was highly choreographed. They were all well trained.
No, you don't say it, especially to kids, man. Like, what the hell? I'm assuming you did the same thing with frickin' Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, any of that crap. Like, did you just take the magic away? Like, is that what you do? You tell them, oh, did you know that this movie's not real? But there's voice actors and cameras and camera crews and CGI artists that make all, like, dude, what? Why would you do that? Especially to your children. Like, if you don't want them to do the moves, then you just say, these are professionals. They are incredible. They are very well trained. You do not try this at home. Like, that's how we grew up with it. And we never had to break kayfabe. I didn't have kayfabe broken for me until I was about 8-9 years old. And you would always have those jerks that would always just be like, it's fake, right? It's fake. But, if you're all about taking the magic out of like a child's life and the wind out of their sails, then good job, Piers Morgan. I can imagine your kids are going to love you when they grow up.
And everyone was earning good money. What seems to have unraveled since is that behind the sort of family entertainment vibe that it was generating was a lot of stuff that was certainly not conducive with family entertainment. What's your perspective on it?
Well, Piers, I will tell you one thing really bothered me when I left.
Oh, shut up. You're the one who for years credited yourself with bringing the Attitude Era. Now you're just going to rewrite it because it makes you look like a better person because you found God.
To backup coach. I was the head writer during the Attitude Era. We were very successful during that time. The reason I left Vince was because I was looking to relocate my family because I was putting in so many hours. My wife was raising my kids by herself. And Vince McMahon looked me in the eye and said, Vince, I don't see what the problem is. You make enough money now, hire a nanny to raise your kids. Those were his exact words. I was on the phone with WCW the next day because I was no longer going to work for a man like that. He showed me his true colors. But when I was writing
That's funny. The story that you've told over and over and over is how Eric Bischoff pilfered you and that you thought it would be a good wrestling angle. And you hinted at backstage stuff, but dude, this is why you can't trust guys like Russo. They rewrite history all the time.
The Attitude Era, and what the Attitude Era was all about, Piers, was blue collar versus white collar. That's what it was all about. Stone Cold Steve Austin, Vince McMahon. Austin was telling McMahon every single thing a blue collar worker would want to tell his boss. Well, when I left, all of a sudden there was a shift. And that shift was all of a sudden Vince is on camera with all these beautiful women, making out with them, kissing them, groping them. They're groping him. Now, Piers, you got to understand something, and everybody here will understand this. As a writer, I could have never written any of our female characters in that position because they couldn't have said no. They would have had to say yes because it was with Vince McMahon, and they would have thought if they didn't do this, they were going to be fired.
They credit Trish Stratus. I have always had a hard time saying her name. Trish Stratus. She there's a whole thing where they did an angle where she was like the mistress, and then all of it, like, she actually can wrestle too. Like, she's one of the ones that's credited with bringing the women's evolution into the WWE and just women's wrestling in general, where instead of just being, tits and ass, like, kind of stuff, it did become about the wrestling, but that's how she got her start.
So when I saw this type of behavior after I left, it never sat well with me. Now, I don't know if that came from Vince or the writers, but like I said, he put all those females in a situation where they could not say no because they may have felt like their job was on the line.
She's blinking a lot. I'm thinking that Charlie has a story or two.
Okay, well, Charlie, you are the female of this panel. What's your view of Vince McMahon? Who is the real Vince?
So from my perspective, I didn't always get such a clear look at who Vince McMahon was. I didn't have to be in the writers' meetings like a lot of people did. I basically would show up to work, be given a script, say, this is what you're doing. And I would generally communicate with other people on the writing staff and my bosses, which mainly included Michael Cole. He was the main one. If I had an issue, I would talk to him rather than directly talking to Vince. But what I will say is that even in my position where I wasn't interacting with Vince on a regular basis, I think like everybody else, I always aspired to get validation from Vince McMahon, because when you did cross paths with him in the back of, the arena or in the hallway, if he would say something to you, it would mean something, even a simple hello, because Vince a lot of times wouldn't even address you. And if he would address you, it means he either found you were doing something correctly or he liked how you were going about things. And especially when you got a good job. That was like, oh my goodness, Vince just told me good job. What did I just do that I need to now replicate each time moving forward? So I would say there was
Man, it sounds like a psychological mind F.
a lot of pressure there. Even though I didn't talk to him a lot, when he did speak to me, it definitely resonated. And I'm not sure that's a good thing or a bad thing. But I definitely think that's what happened with a lot of the people in the company, and especially these people that were put in situations that were maybe more uncomfortable than others. If they were
No wonder they viewed him as a god.
getting this validation from Vince in those situations, they probably put their own self-respect on the back burner, because ultimately that's what you want to hear from the bosses of all bosses at WWE.
I mean, it was a very sort of high testosterone environment, wasn't it? Very macho.
Oh, yeah. You don't understand, Piers. It was a macho madness in the backstage area. Yeah, lots of respect for women. I'm actually sick. I can't do my full impression.
In your time there, did you feel that it was all consensual in terms of the way women were treated? Later, of course, it emerged that Vince McMahon had paid off a number of women millions of dollars to set.
Yeah, coming in and saying a little bit of, I'm sorry. Yeah, here's a paycheck. Yeah. Coming at you, yeah.
Lawsuits. Did that surprise you, or was he the kind of character where actually that was not that surprising?
Not surprising at all. Oh, no.
What I've always said is if you do not have a thick skin, you do not belong working in the WWE. I do find that to be the case in a lot of areas in television. I think
No, that's the entire... they actually say that, like, you're too nice for this business. That is wrestling. A lot of people have been told that.
Woman, you must have thick skin. Were there many instances where I probably could have gone to HR over something small or even something that probably had a little bit more oomph to it? Yes. Was I the person to do that? No. Now, I'm not saying that I was, mistreated in any sort of way, but there were definitely things that went on at WWE that if an outsider were to get a glimpse on the inside, they would say, what is going on here? How are people working in these specific conditions?
Dude, they used to like crap in each other's suitcases as a joke, like
but it's just
on the reg.
It's one of those things that you kind of went with. You were working with the WWE. I'm interviewing men who were wearing nothing but like tiny little Speedos on. So it's kind of like the job that you sign up for.
Okay.
It's kind of weird to hear a wrestling personality recognize that.
Marvin, you were sacked by Vince McMahon. He obviously had a ruthless streak, like many successful business people. What's your view of him?
Well, Vince, I echo everyone's sentiment so far. And just like Coachman said,
Maven's a good podcaster, but he was a mid wrestler. Like nobody ever really got like. I never heard anybody just overtly come out and say, I'm a Maven fan.
He said no to Vince one time in 13 years. I never knew saying no was an option. When Vince said something, it was pretty much law. I got on his bad side one time, and it was right before we were getting ready to go on an extended break. And an extended break for wrestlers might be an additional 2 or 3 days at home. But it was right before one of these breaks. I had a an average match. Wasn't a stinker, wasn't a horrible match, but just wasn't great.
Yeah, that was most of your matches, Maven, let's be honest.
And as soon as I came through the curtain, he was there. And he was there to let me know just how mad he was at me. And he told me, during your time off, you need to decide if this is the place you want to be.
I have a feeling it was the one with Batista.
Now, there's that side of Vince, but there's also the side of Vince where after a 3-year battle with cancer, the night my mom passed, I didn't get a call from his secretary. I didn't get a call from his wife. I got a call from Vince telling me exactly how just how sorry he was for my loss. So it's good and bad with the man.
What do you think the general view, Maven, is of this? I mean, when I watched the documentary series, depending who you're listening to, a lot of the bigger stars talk quite fondly of him, and yet we know there's been a slew of scandals.
Yeah, weird. The ones that made him all the money: Hulk Hogan, Mark Calloway, aka The Undertaker, Triple H, Paul Levesque, Triple H. Yeah, those are the guys that, well, Paul is literally his son-in-law, and he's running the company, so yeah, it's kind of weird how those guys wouldn't say anything bad about him and would speak very, very, highly about him, but it's kind of weird where I already know what he's doing. He's about to discount what Maven and the lower card guys are saying just because, a Hulk Hogan is just, you know what, brother, I love him. He's like a father to me.
Around it. We know he's effectively been pushed off the scene for now anyway. No,
not for now, buddy. Notice how he did that. For now, anyway. Yeah, once all this Me Too crap is out the door, because that's what dude, he's such a... Piers Morgan really is an elitist piece of just excrement.
No longer has the family ownership that he had, etc. Is it right that he's being depicted as a kind of villain now, or do you think that's been over?
Oh, gee, depicted? You mean the fact that
played?
Oh, Lord. Please,
well, I'll
somebody.
answer your first question, obviously, first. The stars who have a fond view of Vince is a very transactional individual.
Right.
If you're making him money, and a lot of these stars were making him millions, he loves you. Oh. And you talked about me getting let go by Vince, and I agree. When you see Vince backstage, he'll ignore you. If you mean nothing to him or nothing to his show, he'll pass you by and won't give you the time of day. But Vince made his bed. He's unfortunately now lying in it. I know that there's probably more to come, and like most people, I'm simply sitting back waiting for whatever is going to unearth itself.
Well, you guys obviously were all on the inside. I guess that the person who could be best described as Vince McMahon's nemesis was the New York Post journalist Phil Mushnik, who's been running a slew of exposés.
That's a name that's been in my lexicon since I was a little kid. I used to think that the New York Times was the devil because he really had me convinced.
About bad practices at WWE. You want to give a little clip of an example of what I'm talking about?
Move this.
I don't know why he has vendetta. They really didn't want to look. They didn't want to know. Against me, I don't know why. Because he's a dirtbag. Vince is guilty of aiding and abetting the Ring Boy scandal. At best, he's guilty of rank neglect. This was the biggest guy in cable TV. Nobody wanted to look a little deeper. Why aren't these things page one? Millions of kids worship these guys, and they're dropping dead. Where's the news? And again, McMahon seemed to escape that.
Jonathan, what's your view?
So Miss Elizabeth in there. Don't you go after Elizabeth, yeah.
View of Mr. Mushnik and all his exposés?
Well, I think when you write for the New York Post, and I came in long after a lot of the things he was just talking about that.
Oh, the Post.
In the documentary. But when you write for the New York Post and your entire job is to write negatively about somebody, he knew that writing negatively about
hang on. I write for the New York Post, and that's not my directive. I'm a columnist.
Wait.
I'm a columnist for the New York Post. No one tells me to be negative. I can write what I like. So I would take issue with that.
Yeah, but when you're a useful idiot and you kind of write the things that they would already, transcribe to you, hey.
In the 90s. Okay, well, I'll say back in the 90s when he's writing about that, I'll say specific to this then. I apologize to you, Piers. But he started writing about this, and these are things that people will resonate with, that they'll latch onto. And I will tell you this, that in my entire 13 years of being in the WWE, I never saw Phil Mushnik even try to come backstage to see what the atmosphere was like. I never saw him ask to have a sit down with any of us. And I think that sometimes when you're a journalist, especially and you're trying to sell newspapers and you're trying to sell your column and you know that people need to read it for you to keep that, I think that's where Phil has always fallen on. And he's the one guy, because I love a good back and forth. I love a good and a bad. And I would never sit up here and completely defend Vince. But I will say that Mr. Mushnik in particular, because we used to talk about him all the time, because it seemed like every other article that he would write was something about Vince, something about the WWE. And there are
It was like every other day.
a lot of good.
It was literally every Tuesday. They would strategically place his articles after Monday Night Raw.
Things that I got out of the WWE. I have two beautiful children that without the WWE, I wouldn't have today. I had the talent that I have, the way that I do my job, I got by learning in the WWE. So every article, I don't remember anything that Phil ever wrote that had one positive thing to say about the WWE or Vince. And if you're that kind of a writer, I don't have a lot of respect for it.
Yeah.
Vince, would you agree with that
Piers,
about Phil Mushnik?
I have to jump in here because I've got a personal story, and I guarantee you, Mr. Mushnik does not remember this. I never forgot this. In 1991, when the steroid trial was going down and Vince McMahon was facing jail time, after he was found innocent of all charges, Vince and the WWE had a steroid symposium where they were going to change policies, and the media was invited, including Phil Mushnik. I went to that steroid symposium because I was media at the time. I recorded the entire symposium. Phil Mushnik, who made a living out of burying Vince McMahon, was invited, did not attend. Not only did he not attend, he wrote a story in the New York Post the following day filled with untruths. How do I remember that? Because I got on the phone with Phil Mushnik and I said, bro, and I was not working for the WWE. I was a journalist.
There it is.
I said, bro, you are full of crap.
We got two, bros.
I have every word that was said on this tape recorder. He didn't say some of the things that you said. So again, as a journalist, I ask the question, what kind of a journalist are you if you're not going to go to a symposium you're invited to, and then you're going to report on it with false information? From that point on, Phil Mushnik had zero credibility with me.
Okay, and Charlie, your views of Phil Mushnik?
Well, I was not a part of WWE when Phil Mushnik was really doing most of his dirty work. But what I will say is just by garnering a lot of knowledge throughout the course of the documentary, it seems like he was the type of guy, he definitely had it out for Vince. He would throw whatever he could at the wall, see what stuck, because ultimately there were going to be certain things that stuck. I'm sure there were certain people who would side with a guy like Phil and say, yes, I can back up your story. But then there's other people who would have the complete opposite to say. So Phil just seems kind of like one of those dirty journalists who, no matter what, his goal was to bring down Vince McMahon. And I believe that, Vince, he definitely played the bad guy well. He said in the documentary, we all heard, there's nothing I wouldn't do for this business. I regret nothing in my life. So when you say things like that, it makes Phil's job a whole lot easier. But judging by what Phil said, I mean, there were definitely upsides to Vince McMahon. And I think a lot of people have explained it.
This is the importance of being fair in journalism, because you don't ever want to have that kind of accusation levied against you where you're out for blood for somebody, so it automatically like discredits everything that you've written.
Well, I do think that ultimately it was about Vince and his bottom line, but there are lots of stories about Vince really taking care of his people. And I also got to know that side of Vince as well. Not personally necessarily. I wasn't ever looking for personal favors from Vince, but from people that I was close with in the WWE, I heard those things.
Okay, Maven, any thoughts yourself about Phil Mushnik?
Yeah, I think Mr. Mushnik had Vince in his journalistic crosshairs. I think he found an easily attainable target, someone he could go after, someone who was big enough, large enough, ran a large enough company, a worldwide company. So he knew whenever he wrote anything, it was going to garner attention. And I'm not saying everything he wrote about Vince was incorrect. Hell, it probably wasn't. A lot of the stuff he wrote was accurate, but there's a lot of things that you just don't see on the day-to-day operations when you're working with someone, on 365 days a year. And I just don't think Mr. Mushnik was ever looking for anything good out of Vince.
Well, no, like all of his steroid coverage was implicating Vince McMahon as like this steroid peddler instead of just what it was, where these guys came in and he just, turned the other cheek.
Only looking for the bad.
Okay, well, look, in classic WWE...
Turn the other cheek. He looked away.
Fashion. It's time to introduce to the uncensored ring a surprise guest.
Oh.
Because flying in off the top rope, hopefully not with the steel
coming in with the steel chair,
is the New York Post legendary columnist and Vince McMahon nemesis, Phil Mushnik. You've been listening to all of that. Phil, welcome.
Wow.
Oh. Okay, so Coach and Charlie are like, Oh, that's embarrassing. Oh, I gotta be a little bit better about, I don't know. Oh, this is gonna be awesome. Let's go.
Thank you.
Yeah, you've been called a few
Enjoyed
things.
it all.
Called a few things there by your fellow panelists. Phil, do you want to respond?
Well, the first thing I'd ask Piers is, can any of your panelists name one thing? One thing
wonderful.
I wrote about McMahon, the WWF, exposing a pedophile ring on McMahon's watch. Somebody who was just like Russo. I got 2 kids. How about the kids who were sexually abused who didn't have parents, and they were all in McMahon's purview. They were all.
Phil, we just.
I'm gonna give Piers Morgan all the credit in the world as a fantastic booker. This was great.
City to city, they see these same.
Right there. I'm going to stop you right there. A lot of what you said
don't
is true.
stop me.
Nobody said
Did
that.
I stop
Phil,
you?
but
Surprise,
you brought
surprise.
up my kids.
You're
No,
a sellout.
Phil,
You're a
Phil,
sellout.
what we
You
said
have no
about
moral
a sellout,
fiber.
A sellout. See, and Piers, this is what I'm talking
You
about.
have-
I've never met this man. I've never met this man, and he's saying I have no moral fiber. He doesn't know me.
He's pissed.
Coach, he wanted proof. I just
said,
supplied the proof.
how come-
I called you out. I called
There
you
you
out
go.
30 years
Coachman.
ago when you made it up. You
ain't
made
never
stuff
spoke.
up, Phil. 30 years ago,
Keep
bro.
shouting, 'cause you're a
30. You're
fraud.
gonna sit there and say
You
we
were the
haven't
guy-
spoken because maybe you're
Yeah.
senile, bro.
No,
maybe
we
you're
talked a lot.
maybe you
Can we bring Jim Cornette in to just solidify all this, and then throw in Dave Meltzer, and then we're just this
We
is
talked
got
a
great.
lot.
out of the chair, bro. You reported on stuff that was
Don't
never
call me
said,
bro.
I'll call you whatever. I'll call you a liar then. How about
You're-
that, bro? I'll call you a liar. You reported on
Knock
stuff
yourself
that was
out.
never said. I recorded
You have no
the
credibility.
You went in
You
the New
used to
York
be-
Post.
you used to be
reported
again-
stuff that
you-
was never said.
Say it,
what?
Mush.
What, bro? I was what?
You're
I
gonna
used to
get-
be what? What did I used to be, bro?
Are you
Tell
going to
me,
let
Phil.
me speak?
Oh, go ahead.
Are you
Tell me
going
what I
to
used to
speak?
be.
You let me speak?
Go ahead.
Sure,
What I
Phil,
used
go
to be.
ahead.
Did
Phil.
you once
I want let
Did you
Phil
once write a
speak.
newsletter
Let Phil
about
speak.
pro wrestling? Did you
Yes.
run once? And weren't you very, very anti-McMahon, right? I
No,
got
I
the
was
copies, so
very
don't
fair. I
lie.
was, yes, show us the copies right now, Phil. Show us the copies right now.
I
Anti-McMahon,
have
my
right
butt,
here.
bro. I was
Moron.
fair. I was a fair. That's why I went to the symposium to hear his side of the story, because guys like you.
What is it about the word symposium that the biggest idiots on the internet are like, I went to a symposium?
You were burying him. So I was, there's got to be another side to the story. That's why I went and you didn't go, because you didn't want to hear the other side of the
come
story.
on, guys.
Because you had to sell newspapers, bro. You're the fraud.
We got so many bros now. See, this is how he actually speaks.
And,
I mean,
you
I can't-
embarrassed
I
me
can't
to
have-
even
I can't
call
have a-
myself a journalist.
Okay, let me jump in as a good
I
referee.
can't-
Good referee would.
I just woke Piers.
Phil.
I woke up
Yeah,
one
dude,
morning.
you're the Phil Hebner of this entire thing. You might as well just get the hell out.
And I was covering mainstream sports, and I decided
Earl
to
Hebner.
fabricate
Jesus.
all these fantasies about the WWF. I didn't even watch it. I thought I knew I could see where it was going. The steroids and the prurient content. I could see it was getting really ugly and really vicious and just sexually inappropriate for anybody. And I just decided I'll make some stuff up. Or did I get calls from ring boys? Well, Piers, can you give me a second? I'll tell you how my inclusion began. I read in the New York Times,
Yeah.
2 paragraphs.
Yeah, they didn't even mention the Pat Patterson stuff.
Hulk Hogan was going to be dismissed from the Dr. Zahorian drug trial, Vince's the wrestling doctor, because it might be injurious to his public image and career. And I'm saying, well, what kind of... But his career is built on take your vitamins, say your prayers, and suddenly he's exploding on drugs. You can see it. It was obvious.
His career was built on 29-inch pythons, brother.
Except maybe to Russo, that he was on steroids.
Let me ask you,
My
Phil.
pythons.
Let me ask you, Phil.
Hey, and then the letters came.
My garden
They've
snakes.
never read anything like that in the mainstream media, and they all read, "You don't know the half of it." So I didn't decide to like throw away my
No,
career
Phil. If
to
you want
become a
my
Vince
Phil, if you want
McMahon.
if you want my opinion, I think you're an excellent reporter who's been doing excellent reporting. I guess the question is, as the panelists said before they knew you were coming on, whether you had a vendetta against Vince McMahon. He called you once on Monday Night Raw a self-righteous, egotistical, miserable son of a bitch. So there clearly was no love lost on his part either. But what is your
You
genuine
don't
view?
think I don't know that's a work?
Of course, but my question was.
That's a work.
Of course, but my question for you is.
This is what he does.
No, of course. It's a kind of Trump-style trash talk. But in terms of your perception of Vince McMahon, it's quite hard
Actually, it's wrestling-style trash talk that Trump has just taken.
to work out from the documentary and from everything I've read and gleaned. where the villain begins and ends, and where the showman, who sort of blurs a line between fact and fiction, begins and ends. How bad a person, in your opinion, is Vince McMahon?
My empirical knowledge, my knowledge based on research, based on interviews, and interviews with really good people. I've met some wonderful people. Bruno Sammartino was one of the most noble people I've met because he told the truth. But
Coach just went, he's a legend. Like, he's the legend. He has more world titles than Hulk Hogan.
based on what I know of Vince McMahon, he's the closest thing to the fictional character Hannibal Lecter I've ever met.
Wow, a serial
He's
killer.
that sick.
Really?
I think he's a sociopath. Yes, absolutely. What do you do when you make jokes on the air, as the future governor of Minnesota did, Jesse Ventura, about all the pedophiles that were being indulged, transported, and all the kids that would show up from city to city?
That would have been the perfect guest for this. Did you know that I was the governor of Minnesota?
Had no parental restraints. They were coming from foster homes. They were easy pickings. They were easy prey. And it happened on McMahon's watch. And it happened on everyone's watch. And you, Vince Russo, who used to be anti-McMahon, then you started kissing his ass because he got paid. And you're like everybody else.
Dude, I even have some clips that I could pull up, specifically the Jim Cornette debate. Yeah, you were not exactly what I would call a Vince McMahon guy.
Sit there and lie without me talking over you. You're
Who's
a
Dr.
liar.
Mauro
I
Di
was
Pasquale?
never pro McMahon ever. I reported the truth and the facts. You did not go to the steroid symposium because you had
All right, that's one example. Move on.
Character.
didn't want to hear a side of it. Did you go, Phil?
Did you ever?
You were
No, you're not
invited. Did you go? What, you had a lunch date, bro?
Here,
Why didn't you go, Phil?
Who's Dr. Mauro Di Pasquale? Who's Dr. Mauro Di Pasquale?
That was the person he had present at the
Wasn't that the dog from Chuck E. Cheese?
steroid symposium.
Oh no, it's the chef. Right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Phil.
And what was his specialty? What was his
I don't have
specialty?
kids, so
Big shot.
I guess he was a
trying to
con
remember
man,
from my
Phil.
childhood.
I guess he was an actor. He was
His
an actor, Phil.
specialty, he was from Canada. His specialty was how to teach athletes to beat steroid tests.
So then
That
why
was his
didn't you go to
specialty.
why didn't you go to the symposium and say that?
To go
Why
listen
didn't you
to
go
this?
to the symposium
Because
and
I
say
was
that,
way
bro?
ahead of you.
Okay, let me bring in.
I
Okay,
don't
hang
tell
on, hang on.
somebody needs to put the screen in front of this, in front of Phil
please.
or Mushnik.
Hang on. Let me bring in Maven, who wants to say something on that.
That was a good run-in, Piers. And in fact, I did know Mr. Mushnik was going to be on here.
sorry.
The only question I would have for him, and I'm not going to impugn, his life work. The only question I would have for him is: have you ever met Vince? Have you ever sat down with him? Have you ever traveled with him on the road?
We've spoken on the phone.
I'll never say everything Vince has done has landed, and I'll never say he didn't have bad ideas. He certainly did, and some of the things he did was just plain out evil. But to say he's sadistic, I mean,
Why was any of it though? Why was any of it plain out evil? Why was it plain?
I mean, Phil should be actually asking, and I hate to say that he would be directly kind of implicating them for the culture of silence. Like, that's the bigger question he should be asking instead of like trying to be like, hey, you were part of this.
If he was plain out evil on occasion, why are you telling me that? Oh, I got him all wrong.
Well, here's what I do know.
Phil, everything he's talking about, Maven, and I'll jump in real quick. Everything you're talking about, Phil, happened before four of us were there and 30 years ago. And that what we're trying to give an equal, and we're admitting, all of us are admitting that everything he did was not good. But you haven't brought up one thing that happened after 1999.
Well,
After
okay,
1999.
okay, but here's an interesting point.
I
because-
wasn't covering.
Let me ask you, Phil. Phil, you were one of the first.
Coachman.
Well, Phil, let me just jump in a moment, Phil. Phil was one of the first journalists to expose the widespread use of steroids in WWE. Vince McMahon was acquitted in 1994.
Which Coach is pissed about, admittingly, because that's exposing the business. Like, no matter what these guys say about Vince, like, they are also of the wrestling mind of protect the business at all costs. So you can see that one bothered Coach, and they're not going to change their stance on that one, because most wrestlers that I've talked to still think that the steroid trials were BS, which I'm sorry, man, like, because it did end up exposing way more. It transcended wrestling. Like, Look at the Mark McGuire, Sammy Sosa thing. Like Barry Bonds.
For distributing steroids and won a conspiracy to distribute steroids. He addressed Phil Mushnik directly afterwards. We've got that clip.
I was constantly amazed at the utter lack of ethics of some of the good guys involved in my case, all of whom had demonstrable ties to Mr. Phil Mushnik. I watched the good guys lie to the media, lie to the judge, lie to the jury. I watched the good guys get caught because they tried to pressure my alleged co-conspirator into changing his prior sworn testimony. I watched as the good guys were forced to admit that they had destroyed evidence. And I saw the ultimate impact of the truth when the jury acquitted me and the World Wrestling Federation without us even having to put on a defense or call even one witness.
Phil, there was obviously no doubt that a lot of them were on steroids, right? So were you surprised when McMahon was acquitted? Why do you think that happened?
Because Hulk Hogan changed his testimony on the stand. That's why.
And do you give him any credit for what he did afterwards in cleaning it up?
Piers, I believe that he was prosecuted in the wrong jurisdiction. Had he been prosecuted in Stamford, Connecticut, where all the drugs from Dr. Zahorian were delivered to McMahon, who admitted to using steroids, but he said he did them legally. Now, if he did them legally, go down to the corner pharmacist and get your steroids. Don't get them from a guy who's doing 4 years in prison, in a federal prison.
That's exactly what I did.
So
Mr. Mushnik, that's exactly what I did. I have openly on my channel admitted steroid use during my time in the WWE, and no one from the WWE made me do it. I did it all on my own, and I did exactly what you.
Yeah, and that was the whole crux of the case. So
You said I got a doctor's note.
Mushnik needs to just drop this one.
I got blood work done.
I mean, dude,
I did it as safely as I possibly could, knowing full
PDF
well
file
what the
ring,
ramifications later in life might be.
Under what premise? What was your premise? What was the premise for getting
under the premise that I wanted to, under the premise that I was in the big boys, the league with the big boys, and I needed to look the part. Yeah. It was completely 100%
and there was
my
a
decision.
Presumption.
Vince or no one told me.
No, this has gone on in the business since the early 70s, even before then. Come on. Gorgeous George, the original, like, he was kind of like what you wanted to strive for. Bruno Sammartino, like, even those guys, like, they may not have. I'm not speaking with authority on that one because I'm not entirely sure, but I do know that that's when things started getting a little different because the guys in the industry started saying, oh, well, these are the biggest dudes. I got to start being bigger.
Well, me too.
But the 80s, let's be honest, that was the advent of it. That's when, like, I know,
but there was there not the presumption within the industry that if you wanted to get anywhere, you had to be...
Yeah, you had to be jacked. Okay, Phil, let's not...
roided out. The old expression was, let me die.
Hey, come on, coach. Come on.
So why did you take them? If you didn't need the steroids, if you didn't need the steroids, why did you take the steroids if there wasn't a requisite?
Vanity. Yep. Vanity. Because I wanted to look... I wanted to look...
knowledge of what goes on in that industry. It wasn't just
because I wanted to...
Let me bring in Jonathan, please. Let me bring in Jonathan.
It's not cosmetic surgery.
Let Jonathan speak, Phil.
Industrial surgery.
Jonathan.
Phil, you got to move past 1995, Phil. And we can have an honest conversation. Yeah. I started in 1999. Phil,
I agree.
Please.
Who is it?
It's Jonathan. Let Jonathan.
Not one conversation. And of this panel, other than Vince, I was physically next to Vince more than anybody during that time from 1999 through 2008, through my character work on the show, and also because I hosted a lot of press conferences. We were on his jet together. We were flying all over the place. And not one time, Phil, not once have I ever heard a conversation about steroid use or you...
Any of my my fellow fans, did any of us like Coach? I think we all hated Coach because, I mean, Taz, he was annoying, but none of us liked Coach.
Need to use steroids. And I'm not saying the guys didn't. They openly, like Maven just said, but it's not something we said around.
I mean, you're not blind. You're not blind.
You're deaf, but
not blind.
But Phil, I'm telling you, it's not talked about. And you just said, is it well known that you've got to do it? No, it was not. And that's what I'm trying to tell you, is if you looked at it fairly, instead of always looking at the negative, you would understand that guys have their own brains. And if they chose to use it, that's what they did. Nobody ever made it. No, after 1999.
How many of McMahon's wrestlers?
Phil?
Oh, my God, Phil, you're stuck in 1992.
Wrestlers?
Honestly, it's kind of like this got lost, but I think that the bigger scandal was the pain pills.
How many of McMahon's wrestlers didn't make it to 50 years old? How many died of drug overdoses? How
Too many.
Yeah, too many.
What do you mean, oh my God,
That
this
way
is
too many.
irrelevant?
But that it's not just McMahon's wrestlers, guys. Like that's guys in the industry. I'm just gonna say, like this industry does that. Like it cripples your body, especially back then. And then they got pain pill addictions. Like that's what I was kind of saying. I'm like,
Piers,
Okay.
Piers,
Oh,
you're
well,
talking about
I
every
didn't. I
sport.
didn't indulge. I didn't indulge too
gosh,
many.
Phil.
I didn't suffer
Piers,
too many.
I
You
sat
did.
next
Oh my
to
God.
I
Phil.
sat next
How
to
come-
Vince
how-
McMahon
how come
in a
those people
I
who-
sat
who
next
work
to
for
Vince
McMahon-
McMahon in a room writing
Let him
TV one-on-one
Get his
with
autograph?
the man. Hundreds of days I spent. Never once did Vince McMahon say, "Oh, we're not going to push so-and-so because of his body and he's not on steroids." This guy's delusional.
no, he didn't say that, but he definitely. Come on, don't be so disingenuous to be like he never said. Yeah, you know what? I don't think that this guy's gonna work out. He's a little too small.
This is what I said at the
Come
beginning
on,
of the show.
he did.
Everything out of his mouth is negative about Vince. I spent hundreds of hours with the man. Never one time did he
you're right.
say,
Never once.
so-and-so
Never once.
You know what? I would love to see if Jim Cornette agrees with this.
isn't going to get a push because, bro,
Okay.
he's
If
not.
he tells them that you know that this is real.
I don't
Don't all
suffer
talk over
that.
each other, please. I want to just
I
jump in.
don't suffer-
Hang on, please. Hang on. I want to talk to Charlie, who's been very quiet and
I don't
respectful.
suffer a
Hang on,
pedophile.
Phil. I want to talk to
Shame
Charlie.
on me.
One other thing.
Poor Charlie's just sitting there like,
Charlie has come out of all this, of course, is the link between Donald Trump, the former president, the guy who might be president again in the next 3 weeks. I want to show a clip between Trump and McMahon because Trump was a regular attendee at WWE. So take a look.
do we have?
I say yes, but I also say that in a positive sense because I think there is a lot of showmanship involved with both of them. I think they are both what you would consider to be the ultimate types of businessmen, right? They know what sells. They know how to entertain. They know how to engage. And I think they also recognize talent in other people that then they're able to uplift those around them to also be larger than life. So yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities. And I think that Trump probably, when you look at him now and how he addresses people and how he runs his rallies, I probably think he did pick up a couple of those skills from Vince McMahon in the WWE. And I definitely don't see that as a bad thing. So
and
Donald
Phil,
Trump got a
Phil,
new
I
fan
think-
base from being in the WWE as well.
Right. And Phil, I think you actually tried to warn Trump off McMahon, didn't you?
On 2 occasions, I called Donald, who I've known for years. He even tried to get me fired back in 1988 when I was writing about boxing and his negative inclusion in exploiting the boxers to promote Trump. Thank you, Mr. Trump.
Somebody needs to put the screen in front of the freaking camera for this guy. Like,
Come to my
dude,
casino.
what
And
are
he
you
wasn't a
doing?
sportsman. I
Media
referred to him as
101.
Sportsman Trump. He would introduce the celebrities at ringside and ignore the former world champions who were there. And I thought that was horrible. But I called him and I said, Donald, I have 4. He had just run the Miss Universe contest and he got rid of the winner because she was on alcohol and drugs. And he played this noblesse oblige man and he was going to take care of that. He was going to clean up that pageant. I said, Donald, I get 4 boxes that I'll deliver them to you. I'll get a truck. I'll deliver them to you. With all the FedEx records of the steroids and the opioids delivered to McMahon, the wrestlers, Hulk Hogan, from Zahorian. And and I will give them to you. You don't want to be involved in this. You don't forget about.
And what did he say?
About the lascivious stuff. What did he say? He knows he's the smartest man on earth. No, don't you worry about it. I'm going to give the money to charity. I said, how much are you going to give to charity? Oh, about $1 million. And I said, well, I hope to see the ceremony where you present that big styrofoam check for.
I'm not sure if that was a joke or not, because realistically, like he's saying he was. I don't know about this.
$1 million. Because if you were going to give $1 million to charity, we'd all know it.
And Phil, just where are we now with this? This documentary's come out. Everyone's been talking about it, watching it, debating it, and so on. Vince McMahon, since the merger of WWE with UFC, well, he's now a minority shareholder. The family's lost control. He's
He actually got pushed out of it.
worth billions.
We don't know.
People.
We don't
I was
know.
going to ask you. You're plugged in here.
He's not
What is the reality of his control over it? Still,
I'm not plugged in. I never. Piers, I'm not plugged in. I never wanted to be plugged in, and I'd love to be unplugged. But I got in it. I made my journalistic bed here, and it's followed me. And I'm proud of what I've done. Very proud. For another newspaper, not a tabloid, I would have won a Pulitzer for this.
right. But my question, really was, where are we now with Vince McMahon? Is he done with WWE, or do you think he'll make, as some people believe, a big comeback and take control again?
I don't think he has to wear a title on a piece of stationery. I think he'll always be, if not omnipresent, certainly present. People like that don't go away.
I don't know. As somebody who watches the product, I'll tell you, like, when if he does come back, because the booking will start being reminiscent of the McMahon days, which at the end there was becoming so obvious, like the way that he would rewrite the shows right before they went on, and it was just, you could tell just from the dialogue, you could tell just from like the matches, like you could tell when they didn't have enough time to actually slap something good together, just because they wanted to get his idea out there.
You can't.
Well, also, why would he come back? Because WWE is doing so well without him. They're breaking attendance records. They're selling record numbers of merch.
Yeah,
they are building up stars like they've never before. So why would? Yeah.
Why wouldn't he come back? You tell me. You're a female.
No, I said why
I
would
have 2 daughters.
No, I'm saying why would they bring him back?
He is.
Yeah, you haven't watched the product in how long? Women empowerment is like the strongest it's ever been in the product. Like, if you think that the product is still the Attitude Era, dude, you really are living in the 90s.
Why would they? No, you tell me. Why were you asking? Why wouldn't they bring him back? He has been abusive toward women.
No, Phil, I think you misheard her, Phil.
Yeah, you misheard.
I said, why would they bring him back?
Phil, I think you misheard what Charlie said.
I-
She was saying, why would he go back? He's doing very well without him, is what she said.
Yeah, because it's his lifeblood. It makes his heart pump if he has a heart.
But it's not up to him anymore.
Yeah.
Right. So, Charlie, what's
Yeah, actually, there's been reports that his health is failing because he's not at work.
your view of where we are in terms of...
How do we know that? But Charlie, how do we know that? How do we know it's not up to him anymore? It wasn't up to him last
Just
time.
because I think you see the direction. But I think you see the direction that the company's going in. They're bringing in people that never before really had any business in the wrestling industry. I mean, you have Tony Khan, a former entertainment agent, who's now running the show over on the WWE side. You have UFC swooping.
Wait, I forgot.
And buying.
Wait a minute, is his name Tony Khan?
WWE. I mean, TKO Group owns both of them. I mean,
I don't think his name's Tony. Is it Tony
they're
Khan?
clearly going in a different direction where they're very much geared towards entertainment. They're all about bringing in celebrities. It's so much different than it used to be. I personally am partial to the WWE of the older days. But, you know, I like
what they choose to do with their adult, educated lives. That's their business.
Okay, let me bring in...
I don't think that...
Okay, I've got to wrap it up, guys.
It seems like now you just have a vendetta against wrestling in general.
I want to just get a quick reaction from the three we've not heard from on this. Jonathan, is Vince McMahon done now with WWE in a controlling way? Do you think that's it?
Well, he's done now. There's no way they're going to bring him back. There's way too much money involved. They got the biggest deal in the history of the company, $5 billion with Netflix, who's going to be around. And that's kind of what I wanted this conversation to be.
Yeah, pre-merger or like pre the merger, he could have pushed to come back. That's what he did pre-merger. But now TKO, no, they're not for business. No, he's too bad for business. And you know what? That's the bet that he made, where it's all about the business. So sorry, Vince. Your structure kind of screwed you.
Is moving forward, because I think as it's gone in TKO, when they bought it, part of the reason they looked at it and said, what do we need to get rid of? And we're not here to defend Vince. None of us are here to defend Vince. What we're here to defend is that there are good parts of the business. There are good people that are in this business.
Right.
And when you do a wide swiping, just everything is negative, it's very, very short-sighted, especially when you look at the last 25 years and you see these really good people like Charlie and Vince and Maven sitting on here. We've had really good lives. We've all moved on from the WWE. I've been at ESPN. I've been at PGA Tour. And I'm doing a lot of really good things just like they are. So when I get called a sellout or there's this blanket thing, Piers, that it's just all negative, that's when I have a problem with it. Vince is done. Vince is not coming back, and we're all cool with that. And he doesn't need to come back.
Yeah, I mean, as much as Mushnik wants that to be the thing, where he's like, he wants him to do the monolith thing, like he wants him to be the villain.
Because they fixed a lot of the things.
Mushnik really does, like, you can see the bias. And as much as there was truth to his reporting, unfortunately, even I'm going like, I'm not sure if I can even...
More issues during all of our times in the WWE.
Maven, do you agree with that?
100%. Vince is definitely done. I think the world's moved on. It's a different time, and it's a different generation than the one that Vince knew. And I think there's just that we're in a place in society where people just aren't going to stand for even allegations and allegations that are backed with fact. WWE's moving on, like Charlie.
Lots of texts.
He said they're setting attendance records. The stock is up, and they are creating new stars, and they're doing it without the man that started it all. And like Coachman said, we've all moved on. I don't even watch the product anymore.
Right.
I haven't watched wrestling in I don't know how long, with no plans to.
Right. Vince Russo, finally to you. Did you feel that WWE's moved to a better place? Is it
I'm such a mark.
basically a cleaner, better, less scandalous version of what it was under Vince McMahon?
Well, Ari Emanuel would have to be the stupidest businessman on the face of the planet to still have any association with Vince McMahon. And obviously, looking at his success and the success of his company, he's not.
Yeah.
So with Maven and Coach, 1,000% Vince has nothing to do with the WWE today.
Guys, what a fascinating debate. I've learned a lot. It's been a heated, passionate debate on all sides. I appreciate you duking it out together in true WWE
Also, can I
fashion.
just say something real quick?
Yes, Charlie, quickly.
I think I said Tony Khan was over at WWE. Now I meant Nick Khan, the former entertainment
That's what I'm saying.
agent, not Tony Khan.
Oh my God, Tony Khan, baby.
Who actually runs the opposing AEW, not Tony.
Your clarification.
Oh, she just gave a free plug for AEW. I wonder if she did that. Again, this is like how much of a mark I am. I'm like, oh, that she might. If I see her on AEW television, we know where she got her plug.
Noted and will be included. Thank you all very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Oh, that was wonderful. Okay, so as I said, I was not planning on doing this like at all. I had just seen that they had I saw Coach and Maven, and I was like, wait a minute. And then Russo, I'm like, oh, this is gonna be just straight wrestling talk. Oh, this is gonna be awesome. I can't wait to cover this. So I'm sorry if you came here looking for a political debate. I needed this break personally, and yeah, this was a lot of fun to cover. My wrap up assessment of this is number one, the fact that it's Russo, Coach, and Maven, who they all three have pretty successful wrestling podcasts, but in the business itself, Coach was never really that respected. Maven was never really that respected. And Russo, he's got his fans, but not a lot of people in the wrestling industry trust a word that dude has to say. If you're interested in like more wrestling drama and you're not really into the business itself, look up Eric Bischoff versus Vince Russo. I'm telling you, it's not like it's the wrestling matches aren't there. It's all real and it's hilarious. They have so many clips of these guys talking mad crap about each other. It's the best. Mushnik, man, like that was one of the things that really struck me where I was, I had to kind of reevaluate how I looked at his writing because of the whole, yeah, I was a fan, and also, yeah, I was a kid, so I was like, yeah, this Phil Mushnik guy he's just going after the business guys, and I had the same mentality as Coach and those guys, where it was kind of like protect the business, protect kayfabe. But man, yeah, I hate to say that the assessment of him just having a hard on for Vince and he'll ignore anything good just to make sure that he's seen as the devil. That because I think I tried to say that in the middle of the video where he kind of loses his credibility on the other stories that he's doing. I don't know why the hell I'm spitting so much. Jeez. But he does. As I was saying, he loses his credibility on the other stories because he's so locked in on Vince as a bad guy that, yeah, I'm sorry, the bias just ruins everything else, even if there is truth to it, which that's horrible because the PDF file story that he did about Pat Patterson and the Ring Boys, which Pat Patterson, ironically, being the one that was cleared. Also, Pat Patterson is a very interesting story in wrestling because he was one of the first openly gay men in wrestling, and he was pretty widely accepted. Like, he was one of the best wrestling bookers ever. And the thing is, you could literally see the product change after he died because he worked up until the day of his death, and it took a hard turn and that's where Vince started making all of these changes. I think that Pat was the one that was there that he respected enough for him not to go, I'm going to change this, pal. So, oh man, that was great. So if you like my content, if you're into politics, definitely check out some more of my videos. If you're not into politics, check out my shorts. It's all my cat. So, got content for everybody. And I don't know, look out for some more wrestling talk because this was fun. I might do a little sub channel or something, figure it out. But as I said, if you enjoyed this content, leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.